This is the weirdest thing that has happened to me since I moved out here, and I've seen some strange things on this land. I live outside a small border town. It's not a place anyone chooses if they like noise or crowds. Out here it's just fields, old houses, and a lot of distance between the few families that are left. My place is a basic farmhouse with some sheds, a barn, and a few dozen animals. Most of my day is feeding, cleaning, fixing fences, and checking on the herd. It's quiet work. Most nights are the same. Early dinner, a bit of TV, bed by 10, up before the sun. Because of that routine, I know what normal feels like on this property. I know how the cows sound when they settle, how the dog grumbles at raccoons, how the barn creaks when the wind picks up. So when something is off, even a little, I feel it right away. The night this started, I woke up to the animals in full panic. They weren't just restless. They were slamming against the stall doors, hooves scraping, low sounds that were closer to screaming than mooing. My dog was barking nonstop at the back of the house. It sounded like someone was out there beating on the barn with a metal pipe. I sat up, half awake, and before I could even swing my legs out of bed, all of it stopped. Every sound just cut off at the same time. The dog went silent. The animals went silent. The whole house felt like it was holding its breath. If it had just been noise that died down slowly, I might have rolled over and gone back to sleep. But that instant quiet felt wrong. I remember thinking, either something scared them all at once, or something walked away all at once. My first practical thought was, bear. We get them sometimes. They usually don't go after the bigger animals, but they do wander close to the barn and make everybody nervous. So I grab my flashlight and my old rifle. I don't use the gun on animals, just sometimes fire into the air to scare them off. When I opened the back door, the dog was there, but not how he usually is. He wasn't growling at the dark or sniffing the air. He was sitting in the corner by the steps with his tail tucked, looking toward the barn with his ears flat against his head. That worried me more than anything. He's usually the brave one. The air outside was still. No wind, no rain. Just a cold, heavy kind of night where sound should carry far. I could hear nothing from the barn. I walked slowly across the yard, sweeping the flashlight back and forth. I expected to catch eye shine from a bear, or at least see something moving along the fence line. There was nothing. Just the track of my own boots and the marks from the day's work. Inside the barn, it was quiet but tense. The animals weren't making noise anymore, but they weren't relaxed either. They were all facing the same way, toward the main door. Their ears were pointed forward, their bodies stiff. You can tell when an animal is just awake, and when it's scared, they were scared. I went to the nearest cow and put my hand on her back. Normally she leans into my hand and snorts a little, but she didn't react to me at all. She was shaking, just slightly and breathing fast. Her eyes were fixed on the doorway. I followed her gaze and lifted the flashlight. There was someone standing just inside the open door. It was a girl. She looked about 12 or 13. She was barefoot, wearing a long black dress that looked handmade. Thick fabric, simple cut. A little bit of embroidery around the collar. You still see that kind of clothing on some older women in town, but not usually on kids. Her skin was pale. Her hair was long and dark, hanging in front of her shoulders. She didn't move or flinch when the light hit her. She just stood there looking at me. My brain tried to make it normal. I knew a new family had moved into one of the houses down the road a while back. I hadn't really met them yet. My first thought was, she has to be their daughter. Maybe she'd wandered off. Maybe she had some mental health issues. Maybe she sleepwalked. All of that felt more reasonable than a strange girl is standing in my barn at midnight. So I lowered the gun a little so I wouldn't scare her and said, "Hey, are you okay? You live down the road?" She didn't answer. She didn't even react. She just looked at me with a blank face. She held her hands slightly forward like she was expecting something. It wasn't obvious, but there was this small gesture like you'd make if you were waiting for someone to pass you an item. I carry a water bottle with me most of the time, even at night. Without thinking too much about it, I took it out and held it toward her. She stepped forward just enough to take it, turned around, and walked back out into the yard. I watched her go. I followed with the beam of the flashlight to make sure she didn't trip in the dark, but she walked steadily toward the direction of the houses. She never looked back. She didn't run. She didn't seem lost. She just walked away like she'd done it 100 times before. As soon as she left the doorway, the animals started to calm down. The cow under my hand relaxed, let out a normal breath, and finally looked at me like she had just noticed I was there. The barn felt normal again. I stood there for a minute thinking about calling someone, but who would I call? The sheriff, to say a kid walked onto my property, took some water, and left. At the time, it didn't feel like an emergency, just a strange encounter in the middle of the night. I told myself I'd mention it to the new family if I saw them in town the next night. Almost the exact same thing happened. I woke up to the sound of animals going crazy. The dog barked once and then went quiet. I got up, grabbed the flashlight and the rifle, and walked out. This time, I was more alert. I went straight to the barn. The animals were panicking at first. Then they went rigid and quiet, staring at the door. And there she was again. Same dress, same bare feet, same expression. I felt less afraid this time, and more puzzled. It felt like watching someone go through a routine they'd practiced again. She held her hands slightly out. Again, I gave her the water bottle. She took it, turned, walked down the path, and disappeared into the darkness. The animals calmed. This started happening regularly, not every single night, but often enough that it became a pattern. Sometimes she showed up just after midnight, other times closer to 2 or 3 in the morning. Every time the animals would panic first, then freeze in fear when she got near, then relax after she left. I kept building explanations in my head. Her parents don't keep track of her. Maybe she's on medication that makes her act strange. Maybe she doesn't speak. I felt sorry for her more than anything. I didn't push her. I didn't ask questions. I figured if she needed water and quiet for a few minutes, I could give her that. This went on for about a month. Then one afternoon, I went to the small market in town to buy feed and a few groceries. While I was in line, I noticed a couple nearby with 2 kids. I recognized the adults as the new family. This was only the second time I'd seen them. I took a good look at their children. There was a boy around 6 and a little girl who couldn't have been older than 4. The girl was tiny, clinging to her mother's leg, wearing bright modern clothes with cartoon characters on them. She looked nothing like the girl who visited my barn. That realization hit me hard. I remember my hands tightening on the feed bag. If this wasn't their daughter, who was she? On the drive home, every explanation I'd been using started to fall apart. Maybe she belonged to some other family farther out. But there aren't many kids in this area, and you tend to know about all of them. The more I thought about it, the less sense it made that some random girl would be crossing fields alone at night just to get water from my barn. That night, I decided I wasn't just going to go along with it. I went out earlier than usual and sat on an overturned bucket inside the barn with the light off. The animals were calm, chewing slowly, occasionally shifting their weight. Around 1 in the morning, they suddenly snapped into panic mode again. Hooves scraped. Heads knocked against wood. The dog outside gave a single bark and then went quiet. I felt my heart rate jump. I kept the flashlight off and listened. I heard the faint sound of bare feet on the dirt outside, then the soft creak of the barn door moving. I clicked the beam on. She was standing right there, a few steps inside the doorway. For the first time, I didn't feel mainly curious or sympathetic. Now that I knew she didn't belong to the new family, there was something unnerving about the way she just appeared and disappeared. I stood up and, instead of reaching for my water bottle, I asked, "Who are you?" Her eyes moved a little, like she hadn't expected me to speak first. "Do your parents know you're here?" I asked. "Where do you live?" Still nothing. No reaction on her face, but her hands went from relaxed to tight fists at her sides. There was a tension in the air that hadn't been there before. The animals were silent but rigid, watching. I realized my own breathing was too loud, so I tried to slow it down. I asked again, more firmly, "Tell me who you are." Her skin started to flush red, especially around her cheeks and neck. She looked angry, but her expression didn't change much. It was more like watching someone struggle not to react. I lifted the gun slightly. I didn't point it directly at her, but I wanted her to know I wasn't just going to stand there unarmed if this turned into something worse. "I'm serious," I said. "You need to answer me or go home. You can't just keep coming here like this." For a long few seconds, she stared straight into my eyes. It felt too intense for a kid. There was no fear in it, only a kind of cold annoyance, like I had broken some rule. Then, without saying a word, she started to move backward. She didn't turn around immediately. She stepped back slowly, still facing me, like she wanted to keep me in sight step by step, until the edge of the flashlight beam just barely caught her dress. Then she turned, walked into the dark field, and disappeared. I waited there for several minutes, listening. The night slowly shifted back to normal. The animals loosened up. A few of them went back to lying down. My dog ventured closer to the barn door again. She never came back after that. Not once. Over the next week, I checked for tracks during the day. We'd had some dry nights, so the dirt should have held at least some sign of feet. I found nothing that looked like clear prints, just the usual mix of hoof marks and my own boot tracks. I also paid more attention to the other houses on the outskirts of town, trying to think of any family with an older daughter who might wander at night. I couldn't come up with anyone. People talked about normal things, fences, weather, prices at the store, but no one mentioned a girl missing, or someone who had trouble sleeping, or anything like that. I never reported it. What would I say? A girl I can't identify came to my barn for water a month straight and vanished when I asked her name. It sounded ridiculous even in my own head, so I'm left with what I experienced and nothing else. I don't know if she was sick or hidden or something stranger. I just know that the animals always knew when she was near, long before I saw her, and they were terrified in a way I've never seen with predators. These days, if the animals start acting up in the middle of the night, I don't rush out immediately. I look through the window first. I listen for how bad it is. I think about whether I really need to step outside or if I can wait and see if it passes. I still keep water in the barn. I still look after the herd. Life goes on. But every so often, when I hear distant noises on a very quiet night, I catch myself staring at the barn door, half expecting to see that small figure in the black dress standing there again, hands slightly out, waiting. If she ever does come back, I don't know what I'll do. What I do know is this. Out here, far from town, not every visitor wants to be understood, and not every routine you fall into is harmless.